It is 6:30. Do we want to begin or do we want to let people continue coming in?
I think we should let people continue coming in for a couple of minutes. 5, let's say.
Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in about 4 minutes. Until then, you'll hear some silence. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Zoning and Development Committee. It's 6:35, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am co-chair. My name is Sharon Pope Marshall, and I'm co-chair of the Zoning and Development Committee. I have the honor and pleasure of also working with Anthony Cohn, who is a co-chair as well, and also Elizabeth Ashby. This evening, we have a couple items on the agenda that I know will interest all of you, including a discussion or introduction, I should emphasize, to the City of Yes, and also an update regarding the Lenox Hill development proposal, and of course, some old business and new business. And for anyone that's new, I'd like to turn the floor over now to Kevin, who will guide us as to how we interact during this Zoom meeting. It's all yours, Kevin.
Sharon, some people are saying in the chat that your volume is not very high.
Oh. Mm.
Okay, welcome. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you are currently muted and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the committee co-chairs. As we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to reactions icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participant section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I made some changes on my laptop, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to hear me better. If not, just indicate in the chat, and Kevin, if you would not mind perhaps sending me a text message to let me know if there are any problems or issues, I really would appreciate it. All yours, Anthony, for the first item on the agenda.
Thank you. Kevin?
Let me turn that on. Okay, you should be able to share screen now.
There we go. All right, let's hope this works. Do you see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good evening. This will be a brief introduction to the third leg of the City of Yes proposal. The city has approved the City of Yes environmental issues. The second one, which we discussed at our the last couple of land use meetings, was the City of Yes for economic opportunity. And the third piece is City of Yes for housing opportunity. This is, this effort will have far-reaching effects in our neighborhood and in our city as a whole. So there's going to be a little history mixed in, mostly because I can't help myself. The two images on this first slide are the corner of 76th and 1st Avenue in about 1925. And on the right, the exact same corner looking more or less in the same direction in 2021. Just sort of giving you a kind of snapshot of neighborhood change across really almost a century. Let's see, is that going to work? Oh. Sorry. There we go. And I'm going to start with a little bit of kind of basic a basic understanding of zoning and the zoning resolution, especially for those who have not spent very much time thinking about those things, whether you're new to the committee or you've been able to avoid thinking about it. This statement, which was part of the 1955 plan for rezoning, which did not go through, but which became the basis of the 1961 zoning, is very clear description. You can all read it for yourselves, I hope. But essentially, it says that the proper function of zoning is to control the use of land and buildings and the size and shape of buildings in relation to each other. Okay, so the zoning resolution is divided into two parts: use regulations and bulk regulations. The first zoning resolution in the city of New York was in 1916. It was arguably the first in the nation. You'll notice that it consisted of 14 typewritten 8.5 by 11 pages of text, and there were 93 maps. These are three of the maps, each one illustrating a particular aspect of the zoning for, well, our part of Manhattan, or at least part of our part of Manhattan. And the three maps relate to use, height, and area regulations. The first map is a basic use map saying that the city was divided basically into three types of uses: residence, business, and unrestricted. And they were enumerated, but the idea was to keep things as simple as possible. The middle map describes the way in which building bulk was governed, which is to say through height. Those numbers, 1.5, 2, there are a few ones in there, mean that the building before its first setback, in other words, the height of the street wall in 1916, was governed by the width of its street. So, for instance, most of the Upper East Side is has a height factor, a height limit of 1.5 times the street width. So, on a wide street of 100 feet, it's whatever that is, 150 feet. On a narrow street, we're looking at something on the order of 90 feet as a maximum height for the buildings. The third map describes essentially yard and general setback regulations within the district. Between 1916 and 1960, 60, it was amended to 92 text pages and the same number of maps. In 1961, the current zoning resolution was passed by, well, in those days, the Board of Estimate. And the zoning resolution was a complete and total rezoning. And what it did was it created many more types of zoning districts. It was 293 pages long and had 127 maps. This is one of the maps that shows a portion of our of Community District 8 on the lower right. One of the interesting things is that whereas the 1916 zoning had posited an eventual size for the city of New York of 30 million people, more realistically, in 1961, the zoning resolution was designed for a city of new special districts and overlays. The zoning resolution has grown from those 293 pages to well over 2,700 pages and the same 127 maps. It's just an idea of the essential need for a major The Department of City Planning is the organization within the city, the agency within the city that controls zoning, the zoning resolution. This happens to be a page out of the zoning handbook. And if any of you want to Google zoning handbook, you can download it. I think, yes, you can download it. And you can also buy a hard copy. And it describes each of the various zones in enough detail for you to understand the difference between an R1 zone, residential 1, and an R10 zone, which is something like Fifth Avenue. As the numbers go up, the density of construction also goes up. So an R1 or R2 district are single-family houses, and so on. R1 is single-family houses. Here we are. All right. How do you get information on a proposal to the Department of City Planning? Well, it's easy. Anyone can do it, and that's what we're going to go through right now very quickly. You go to the Department of City Planning website. This is their, I guess you call it a splash page. And then you look for applications. That takes you to this page. And then the key thing is ZAP search. ZAP stands for Zoning Application Portal. It is one of the few city acronyms, three-letter acronyms that I can remember. And that takes you to this page, which is a whole map of the city zoomed way out with lots of little green dots on it. I don't know if you can see you can see my cursor. Little green dots all over, and then filter projects, because if you don't filter the projects, you get literally every project that is before the Department of City Planning. The next step is to look at project status. And if you're looking for something that isn't yet in public review, in other words, if we haven't gotten it yet at the community board level, but it's been filed with city planning, click on filed, click off all the others just because it's easier. You can do a text match, which is the next line down. It's easier if you know where it is, and you can look for, in this case, citywide, because the City of Yes is, in fact, a citywide proposal. And you can, you click on citywide, and you get, in this case, the two, hang on a second, there they are, the two projects on the right, and you see City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. When I didn't put any filters in at all, there were something like 1,200 projects. So to scroll through all 1,200 of them would be a waste of everyone's time. So you click on City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, and you don't do the little box. You have to click on the actual name of the proposal. And then you come here, which is the page for the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. When Kevin and Will send us information, this is where they send us to when they send us a link. The problem is you're staring at this and you can't find out anything. So you go to public documents. Who knew? And the little triangle on the left, you press that, and it reveals all of the public documents. And it reveals them with this sort of bolded individually, because by the end of the project, there are a huge number of documents. So then you go to draft scope of work, you actually click on the documents you're interested in. In this case, it's the draft scope of work and the environmental assessment statement. And then you open those, and there you are. And those, depending on your browser, those will probably appear on your browser, or you can download them. And then you have what information you need in order to take a good hard look at what the city is proposing, in this case for housing opportunity. Now, what I've done here is I've gone through and I have excerpted the information from those previous slides to describe at the most superficial level what the city is trying to, what Department of City Planning is proposing in order to encourage the creation of more housing, and also to, frankly, to simplify the zoning resolution. So this statement, and Will and Kevin are going to put it, make it available on the website after we're finished with this, so you can all read this in great detail as we go through this. The individual bits and pieces that seem most pertinent and important, I have in fact highlighted in this loud blue. So the point of the whole thing, according to city planning, is to create more space for affordable and supportive housing, in our case, in medium and high density districts. And it's important to think about the kinds of housing they're interested in creating. It's not just affordable housing by the federal definition of affordable housing. It's also supportive housing, which includes the various kinds of long-range, mid-term shelters, housing for seniors, and it, so that the idea is that this is intended to be a far-reaching example of more housing. So the first proposal, medium and high density proposals. Remember, we were talked about our residential districts 1 through 10 with lots of suffixes. And the idea is that medium and high density districts are R6 through R10, which R6 is more or less a 6-story building, and an R10 is a building that, depending on the size of the lot and its location, is more or less unrestricted. So just giving a sort of dumb idea. Just going through the blue stuff, this proposed action would increase FAR for all forms of affordable and supportive housing in all medium and high density districts. Now, what that basically means, floor area ratio, is an abstract number which is used to determine allowable floor area in a building. So it is a multiplier, a multiple of the floor area of the lot. Pretty simple. So the idea is to make the rules for all R6 through R10 districts the same as they are now for affordable housing in R10 districts or senior citizens housing. So for districts without existing permanent, the idea is you can add 20% above the FAR for market rate residential, provided that 20% is used for some kind of affordable or supportive housing. And in order to make that work, especially in the lower density of the higher density districts like R6 to R8, the building envelopes will be adjusted to accommodate that increased FAR. Okay? And so the idea is also to allow supportive housing to be classified as either use group 2 or use group 3. We had a problem with that long-term shelter on, I guess it was 92nd Street a couple of years ago, because it wasn't zoned. It wasn't zoned for any use that made sense for supportive housing. And I think that this is to try and avoid that problem in the future, and to make it easier for those types of nonprofit supportive housing to be created. All right, 1.2, small and shared apartments. There is something in the building code which is called the dwelling unit factor. The dwelling unit factor basically says you can't have apartments smaller than a certain number. And the number is now, I think, 650 square feet, something like that. And so the idea is to eliminate that within the Manhattan core and reduce and simplify it elsewhere. We're in the Manhattan core, so that's really what we're interested in. And then they also would like, as part of this, to remove zoning obstacles to small and shared housing models for affordable, supportive, and privately financed projects. That's partly to permit a partial return to single room occupancy apartments, which is something that I think people will be interested in discussing. Eliminate obstacles to quality housing development. And this is important, and this is a really good, I'm sorry, I'm editorializing, a really good and profound change to the zoning resolution. The system to be replaced is a complex formula for open space and rear yards in residential zones. Quality housing allows for larger bulk through a series of requirements that reduce floor area counted against the floor area ratio of a lot in exchange for building amenities. So you have to plant street trees, you have to have laundry rooms, you get another bonus if your building hallways have windows, garbage chutes, all of the things that frankly you would want to have in a new building. Quality housing mandates and helps the developer by allowing them to deduct that floor area or a portion of that floor area from the building's total in order to, well, basically build a little more rentable or sellable space. A little further down, however, they would like to eliminate the sliver law for developments that utilize quality housing regulations, regardless of district. And 1.4 is conversions. How can we take buildings that already exist and reuse them and convert them to housing? So part of it had to do with buildings that were built before 61 or 77 could be more easily converted. Now the idea is to change that, update it to 1990, expand the geographic applicability of the adaptive reuse regulation citywide. So it's only allowable in some districts, expanded to all. Enable conversion to a wider variety of housing types, including rooming units, supportive housing, and dormitories. Rooming units, again, being sort of like the single room occupancy of old, but hopefully much better buildings. There are some restrictions that can't ever apply to us because we don't have C6 zoning in Community District 8 or any C6 zoning. The low density proposals have nothing to do with us. We have no low density residential zones in Community District 8. This mostly refers to Staten Island, portions of Queens, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. And essentially, the point is, just to sort of briefly describe it, is to slightly upzone, not upzone in a big way, but allow a slight expansion of floor area in some of those districts, and also to allow auxiliary dwelling units, a little bit like a tiny home in the backyard, in single family and two family residences. And then there are some other technical issues having to do with the side yards and things like that. And then there are parking proposals and seek to eliminate parking requirements citywide for new residential development. The idea being that parking is expensive to build, and developers will be more apt to build buildings if they don't have to put any parking in it. And finally, piece 4 is so-called other zoning changes. And the components of this represent zoning changes to help massage the zoning resolution to allow more housing and more types of housing in districts or areas whose current zoning wouldn't allow it. So as the city changes, rather than remapping lot by lot a manufacturing district to allow housing, the idea would be to create new zones that have that ability baked in. And that's I think, yes, that is the end of the presentation. So that's really the basic, simple things that are in that in those documents. Each one is all of about 30 pages long. So I encourage everyone to read them. And I think I'm going to stop sharing. Great. And I am going to, I guess we can have the usual, hang on a second, participants, good. We can have the usual comments. Let's see if we have just to hold off on Alita and Marco for a minute. Let's see if there are people from the public. Elaine. Okay, Elaine Walsh first.
10 seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony, for such a thorough educational piece, because so many times
Thank you.
what we get to is what's before us without some background. My concern with the whole city of it, yes, and we're on housing now, is that I don't see any data that supports the positions that are being taken. We are not looking at any unintended consequences. It is a wish list from the mayor, delivered by city planning. As I listened to you and as I looked at the materials, I guess my concern is that there is an assumption without community input that everybody's very happy about this and it will do something for housing for someone. This is not about affordable housing. We see no numbers. We see no requirements that have to be done. And one of the things I'll respond to is the SROs, the single room occupancy. I worked in the field as a social worker for many, many years in the 60s and 70s, and they were hellholes. And granted, the reason why they were eliminated for the most part is because developers got a J51 to redo the housing. And every time I pass one on 81st Street off Central Park West, and that's Amsterdam, no, Columbus, West Side, drives me west, combining, I laugh because I would not want to have lived in that building. But beyond that, what I'm not saying is, what does this do for a community? You've talked about, increasing the height to have the 2-story building made to a 4-story or near the subway or the railroad, whatever. Yet in our community, we've seen that all torn down with the goal of high rises with we have no idea who lives there, who's paying for it, and there is no affordable housing. Historically, in our area, I'll give a little history now. When development was being done and there was to be affordable housing, there was a deal made with the city that affordable housing for the units that should have been in our neighborhood were put into the other boroughs, not built in our neighborhood. We were not fortunate like other communities to have it. I don't see how this is going to help our area whatsoever. And I am concerned, I'm not going to get into the commercial piece, that one drives me crazy. But there's assumptions here without any real discussion, not with a community board, because you represent a small vast of people who don't talk to the community, I'll be honest. And none of the people I know in the community have heard about this. They are outraged. This proposal, while it has limited impact for us right now, it has major input for our city as our city. And so I'm opposed to this totally. There are assumptions here written by people who don't know New York. And, you know, even the garages, are they expensive to build? Yeah, but they make money. But where are people going to park their cars? I'm going to tell you a little scenario and then I'll shut up. I talked to a developer who has property in Midtown, garages. With congestion pricing, there'll be a $15 hit on these workers who have to drive. Why? Because they carry their equipment. How are they going to afford every day a $15 charge? Okay. At the same time, when we're looking at all these changes, nobody's looking at in the Penn State area that's in abeyance. But the property owners there can't do anything because they don't know if they're going to be public domain, et cetera, et cetera. So I think wherever this stuff came from, I'm totally opposed. It does not benefit the New Yorker. And that is my perspective. But it's my perspective of many other locals who live in our neighborhood, who I grew up with because I was born here. So, Anthony, I want to thank you for the presentation. I think it was fantastic. I think there's a dream here by this mayor who does not know New York. And I don't even think he lives here. One final thing, campuses. I think I wrote, what's a campus? Some of the hospitals were redefined as campuses so they can move their spots, the buildings all around within that without going through any other zoning. To me, as an academic, a campus is an academic facility. So that needs to be defined. And in our community, we don't have academic institutions that have the space for growth. So I think it's important that the city define what they mean by a campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Okay, so let's move on to Marco. It's Marco, Alita, Michelle, and Rita.
Thank you, Anthony. I think your presentation about the history, I think it clarifies a lot. Probably what I strongly recommend is in your presentation, you should educate, especially many people, brand new people that have the power to vote in the community board, and they are new completely for the terms floor area ratio, no contextual floor housing factor. I know that right now we have people very knowledgeable in that area. I don't want to offend them, but for those people that they don't know the basics, I think that will be very helpful for that in that direction. And thank you for your presentation. As per report in 2019, HPD received 1.1 million applicants for the housing lottery. Mayor Adams claimed that he's going to build 500,000 units. Therefore, we are in agreement with him. We need to build housing, no doubt. However, do all community boards have the same conditions? The answer is no, no, and not. Because, for instance, our community has the densest community board in the city, in the state, and in the nation. The Department of City Planning says that our community, in our community, was invested in the construction of the Q line subway. So let's go compare apples with apples. The Upper East Side has 3 lines, and the Q line is 4 lines. If we compare with the Upper West Side, which is the same level of income, more or less, have 5 subway lines and has less population than the Upper East Side. Let's go compare another example. Community Board 11, which is in the northern part of our community, has the same streets. Their Avenue, Park Avenue, have exactly the same. And the streets also are exactly the same, narrow as us. Community Board 11 has the zoning 7-2, mid-density, while the Upper East Side has R10, the highest density possible in the Upper East Side. So let's go make another point of this of the case right here. Another one is Park Avenue. It's the widest street surrounded by 16 or 15-story buildings, while Northern Boulevard is wider than Park Avenue, and it is surrounded by 2-story buildings and has the R-line service over there, which basically one of the concepts of this development, of this proposal, is to build within the line, within the massive transit. So, therefore, this senseless universal affordability preference policy proposed is going to reduce housing, the affordable housing stock, displacement and gentrification pressure, segregation, tenant harassment in the RAB district, which is the narrowest street forming an overscale buildings with low densities. So we're gonna lose the R8B as we know, because they are planning to increase the floor area ratio from 4 to 4.8. The higher the building from 75, which most of the walk-ups have only 65, they're gonna increase to 105. And they said that they're gonna build 55 market rate apartments, when in reality, with 11 affordable housing, when in reality, the developer, they never, and I have a study that I can demonstrate, the developer, they never build 100% of the density. They only build 54% down to 24%. So the problem is not the density. The problem is the lowest density that the developer doesn't have no control. I can demonstrate also that the one developer went even to 0 density. Why? Because the city planning doesn't control the density in the lower part. They control on the maximum. And this is very worth it for other communities, yes, but not for us. This thoughtless proposal is encourage the developer to build on irregular lots, to build super tall buildings, rather than to incentivize them to build affordable housing. As per the Department of City data, and since 2015 through 2022, comparing Community Board A Manhattan demolished 876 dwelling units and built 1,579, while Community Board 2 Brooklyn demolished 196 units and built 14,296. Consequently, on no contextual district, the developer demolishes affordable housing to build luxury housing, and the city planning said that it is going to increase affordable housing, when in reality is the opposite. Let me talk about a little bit of, and I'm gonna finish, the issue of the housing factor. Let's go, so everybody can understand. Let's go imagine that a lot has 68,000 square feet. If I divide it by the housing factor of 680, so we have 100 dwelling units. City planning said, oh, let's go reduce the 680 so we can have more dwelling units. That is true. So if I divide the 68,000 square feet divided by 550, I will have 123 dwelling units. Of course, it is. But the issue in our community, it is not increasing the housing factor. The problem in our community is there is no control on the minimum the minimal density that they should supposed to have, because most of the developers, since there is no control, no incentives to control the height or to control the densities, they prefer to build huge apartment, luxury apartment for just only one sector of the population. It has to be built for all people in our community. And that is the problem of the city of Yes. It's just only built, just only for one sector, created an spatial segregation by income or gentrification. And that is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Very interesting points, as usual. Alida.
Thank you, and really helpful and informative presentation, Anthony. Thank you for putting in the time for that. I have a whole bunch of questions because, and I'm sorry for the background noise, I have a whole bunch of questions because I simply don't understand. I don't understand how a change this sweeping, and sorry, Sharon, this comprehensive could be done or even considered without an environmental impact statement. When someone comes in and wants a zoning change for one building, they have to do, I thought, an EIS. Here, these massive, massive changes have no environmental impact at all. And goodness, we really have a lack of light and air on the Upper East Side, where on the eastbound blocks, you have to stand in the middle of the street amidst the cars and the buses to get a glimpse of sky, such as they have in Tribeca, in the West Village, and on the Upper West Side, to say nothing of in the north of Manhattan. It seems entirely wrong and environmentally compounded by the traffic, by the lack of parking, by all of the things they contemplate. So I don't understand the environmental issue. I don't understand, to me, the city's credibility in terms of wanting affordable housing and supporting it is gone. Looking at the project in the village that the Village Historic Preservation, whatever they call themselves, society has talked about, where on a plot of city-owned land, they intend to build a building that's not even permanently affordable. What happened to using a not-for-profit affordable housing and building something that's permanently affordable? So if the city on its own land is not even building permanently affordable, what could we hope for from for-profit developers? So those are two significant things. 3, has anyone actually contemplated the intersections of the other City of Yes proposals and how they affect this one? Because on the one hand, they're making these sweeping changes for housing of all sorts. And on the other hand, they're saying, hey, turn your apartment into a business. What difference does that make? So I don't really understand how, and turn a floor into a commercial or a manufacturing district. How does that mesh with what this whole proposal is seeking to do at all of our expense? And another question is, I simply do not understand quality housing. Does it have anything at all to do with affordable housing? And if it doesn't, how does it justify getting rid of the sliver law? That's something that I simply don't understand. Quality housing, because goodness, there's a luxury building, a Naftali project, I believe, on the corner of 83rd and 3rd that is much bigger or bulkier than it really should be, because I understand that they use the loopholes, not loopholes, but the access to quality housing in order to get more for themselves. So this is not a building with affordable housing as far as I know. So, excuse me. So I don't really get how the sliver law works and why, not the sliver law, why the quality housing and what that has to do with sliver buildings. And maybe finally, I'm not 100% sure. I just don't understand why we can't demand more of developers. This feels like it was done and written by the for-profit development industry rather than by people who actually care about neighborhoods, to say nothing of reducing the heterogeneity, if that's how you pronounce it, of neighborhoods and reducing everything when you look at this combined with the economic opportunity to one giant homogenous mess. And I'm just flabbergasted at how they presume to get away with this. I don't really see elected officials other than Rebecca Seawright, Assemblymember Seawright's representative. So I'm wondering if you have any idea where our elected stand on this, and how do they not look at unintended consequences? I throw up my hands in disgust, in irritation, and in frustration that there is no approach to a comprehensive plan that actually makes sense. So I will stop there. I know you probably can't answer all of them and probably you don't even want to, but I had to ask these questions because I don't get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. I think, just to be fair, I think on balance, the quality housing regulations are generally a good thing. But I also think that, and again, it's just my opinion, that when you see a building that is much taller than it appears it ought to be, whether or not it's as of right, frequently its bulk is as a result of air rights transfers from neighboring buildings. And I think that if we were to limit rather than expand air rights transfers, we would have a slightly different development atmosphere. Anyway, Michelle.
Wait, since I'm still unmuted, I just want to make one more point, if I may, which is that I saw in some East Side paper that there is yet another project that is tearing down X number of units for X minus Y number of units in the finished project. And that seems entirely wrong as well. And is there anything in this that stops that from happening, where we have buildings that use infrastructure that take up electricity? We already have rolling brownouts that cause additional traffic congestion, loss of not enough seats in schools, and all of the other stuff that comes with having a building and using electricity, and having a dark building and yet not having enough units to actually provide housing, forcing the people who had homes in the former building. And this came up with Mr. Spitzer's project on Fifth Avenue, but there are other ones as well. I think Naftali has done it, and there's another one coming down the pike. And it just seems all of this just seems wrong and designed to benefit a certain class of individuals and a certain type of developer. I'm done now. You can mute me, Kevin. Thank you.
Oh, he just did. Okay, Michelle, you're next.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, Anthony, for doing what you did. That was some work, but it's appreciated. Look, I've been looking at this whole thing. We all have in our own way. It's complicated to me, and I've said this before, it's extremely arrogant. In these few years, a small group of people within city planning, within the administration, came together, and they thought they would come up with some ways to increase affordable housing, increase the inventory. Every part of this proposal that I've looked at, I don't see that being the end result. I see a lot of unintended consequences, because you have to cross the housing implications with the business implications, and with the change in the quality of life that will take place if if any of these happen to take effect, such as the obvious one, allowing residential buildings to have businesses on the upper floors in residential apartments. You can have a beauty salon, a barber shop. You can have with low machinery. You can have a shoemaker. You can have a teacher. You can have a tutoring. You can have you can have agriculture. And that was the one that really got me. Agriculture with the moisture, growing with fungus and pests and the weight of the soil. Plus, weed is also a permissible agricultural product in that realm. To me, it's outrageous. They put in as a requirement that you can't have, in order to restrict the businesses, but you can't see more than 1 or 2 customers within a certain time period. Are they proposing to have a monitor or guard outside every single building? They can't enforce the atrocities that are happening out in the open on the streets, never mind what's taking place in the interior. Never mind the disrespect to the security and quality of life and noise and everything else of the people who live there. Also, on the Upper East Side, and even though I know we're concerned about the Upper East Side, I'm concerned about the effect of this on the whole city. Because what may not be a condition for us here now in 2024 may in fact be a condition that we have going down the road, such as garages and what the new proposal is for that, and many others. I won't go into it. What's happening, and they think that their answer is no height limits. Well, Marco did a study. He can show you numbers. The higher the building, the lower the density. So that in fact, when they built these buildings of 400 feet in our district, in fact, the density, they could have like 20 apartments because they'd be duplexes, or they'd be 2,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet or whatever. Now, I'm not proposing a limit on the private sector. I also am not adverse to luxury housing because that's your tax base. And with all the programs that we're bringing in, we need a tax base. So that's all perfectly fine. But don't say that no height limits solves the affordable housing problem, because it doesn't. And then with the effort to reduce housing, to lower the square footage, and that reduces the quality of housing, and that written in this proposal is the ability to have a floor of apartments with a bathroom in the hall. This is part of the proposal. So there are things in this proposal. They use the buzzwords affordable housing, and everybody, well, great. How could you be against it? It's providing affordable housing. But the truth is, that's their PR. That's a false premise. And if you look at the wording in every single description of every part of this entire city of yes, it's prefaced by, this will improve this. This will be better than, in other words, it's all subjective commentary. There are no stats. There's nothing objective. I don't buy their premise. Everything I've looked at here is just the opposite of either getting affordable housing, because it's so contradictory, and also improving the quality of life. Very contradictory to that. I cannot find anything in this proposal that I'm in favor of. And when they talk about, when I raise the issue with city planning about the height of these buildings, and in order to build them so high, you're tearing down the tenements. Their argument is, we're not tearing down the tenements because the buildings are buying the air rights, and that's why they can go higher and higher and higher. However, they are under no obligation to improve the apartments in the tenements that they're leaving behind, which, because of, if nothing else but age, and because there's no incentive for improvement, there's no monetary incentive. There's nothing. So you have very low quality housing, giving up what they have, which might be a windfall for the landlord, to provide more luxury housing next to it. I don't think that this plan was created by people who really, really got past the buzzwords. I don't think they considered unintended consequences, which is true in most of the programs and things that are implemented in this city. And I think that the anti-car lobby has a very, very big influence, and that's the proposal to eliminate parking spaces, which you cannot tell me are more costly to build than the apartments, although it may provide more square footage for apartments, but those are not usually in basement and first floor. So I don't know the logic of that, but we need a requirement of some parking spaces when you're building these buildings. So I'm not in favor of that. So I read this whole thing as carefully as I could. To me, it's very, very, very problematic. I think that we could do some suggestions and propose some zoning that we would like to see happen. I'm also very concerned about what I think is a ridiculous issue. We may not face it in this district now, but it's the little ancillary housing that they want to permit on plots that only permit, single homes. And they say, oh, this will be great because it can house the family, aging parents, a child. They have no jurisdiction as to what those little houses will be used for. They're not putting that into their requirement. And in fact, all the adjacent neighbors who bought in those areas because it was one family zoning, because it was low density, because there was a certain amount of footage that separated one house from another, all of a sudden their quality of life and the value of their homes is just being tossed as though it's meaningless. I don't see the point to that. To me, there is nothing in this proposal that is really, really beneficial in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next we have Rita.
Anthony, thank you, thank you, thank you. Your presentation was wonderful. We don't have affordable housing because we don't want it. We say we want it because it's really politically correct to say it, but we don't want it. When we have a chance, here's a moment of truth. Would we have opposed the blood center if everything above it was going to be affordable housing? Probably not. But we don't do affordable housing because we don't want affordable housing. We want it on paper. I stopped, a neighbor of mine gets the Daily News, and I stopped. This is only just a few recent. These are all affordable housing in Brooklyn, not here. And a single occupancy apartments, they were so popular that they closed them down because there's a danger in it. Wouldn't it be better if we had affordable housing instead of SROs? But we don't house our homeless because we don't want to. We want to on paper, we want to verbally, but we don't really care. We don't want them living near us. We don't want them going to our schools. We don't want all of those things. After 40 years of standing on this soapbox, I'm putting it away, and I have come to the conclusion that we just don't want to. This is This is what we used to call, I'm going to call this marketing speak. This is it's written, and of people who went to school and learned how to do marketing speak. All of those words could have been done much more succinctly, but they don't want people to understand it. And it hurts me because it finally has come to this point in my life, which is toward the end of life, that they don't want to do it. But Anthony, thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Just to hang on a second, Sherry. The zoning resolution needs to be redone in a way that's almost a separate argument from we need more affordable housing. The idea is, if I were to describe the proposal as best I can in a very, very few words, it would be to alter the zoning resolution to encourage more private developers to build affordable or even workforce, as Elaine so eloquently described it the other day, workforce housing. And the question is really whether, as you pointed out, Rita, anyone is actually interested in that as their goal. I mean, aside from us, aside from the people who actually live in the communities, but whether any developers are actually interested in doing that in our corner of Manhattan. Sherry.
Rita, I'm so sorry to hear that you're giving up on your fight. You have been such a champion for affordable housing. The governor is looking to put back a substitute or replace 421, which was incentives for affordable housing. I have some hope for that. I was involved in affordable housing in New Jersey, and any building that was constructed had to put in 20% affordable housing. Otherwise, because each community had to had a number that they had to meet. So they wanted the affordable housing. And I come from an affluent community, Livingston, and our entire community is scattered with affordable housing because every market rate building, either rental or for sale, had to include that. So I don't know why New York, I remember back when we were talking about this, and all the affordable housing that the developer had to put in was sent someplace away, wasn't sent, as was said, was not sent into New York. But what my question is, I'm glad that we had a chance to see this portion of the city of Yes, as opposed to the commercial portion, which our committee did not see. But what is our role, Anthony? Are we supposed to make comments? And is this going to then still be presented for the full board? Where do we go from here? Do we take everybody's comments and those are our comments to give to the full board? Or is it, I don't know. I'm just curious.
No, this is it's a very good point, Sherry. And I'm glad you asked that. We are intending to be doing this as much as we can. At this point, at this time, we don't know exactly when the city, when Department of City Planning is going to file this and sort of begin to visit with the different community boards as a whole. So all that we can do at this point, and I think what we're going to be trying to do is look at this City of Yes for housing, to look at it sort of piece by piece. This was kind of like the big overview. And then we'll take the 4 components, or at least let's say the first 3, and look at them in somewhat more detail. As it is now, the documents that are available on the city planning website were filed at the end of September. Hopefully they're still working on it, and hopefully they will incrementally let us see what they are working on in terms of its details. But I think the idea is that we intend to look at the proposals. Let's say look at the proposals related to the R6 through R10 districts, and look at those maybe next month in our committee. Obviously, the longer the city planning delays in getting it out to community boards, the more time we have to think about it as a proposal in general, and also think about its specifics. I think we're trying to be as proactive as we can, and look closely at the details of it as they begin to be revealed to us.
Yeah, because we should have had the commercial part, which should have been brought to this committee, and then we'd have the people on this committee are the ones that are most interested, and then we could have made recommendations to the full board, as opposed to the full board, it sounds okay, why not? So, all right, so I guess this will be a process. All right, thank you.
Yes,
and
the idea is to try. The idea is to try and avoid the one and done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Sherry.
Anthony, Craig wanted you to comment on some earlier comments that some people were making about the environmental impact statement. He was saying that the environmental impact statement is being developed, and he wanted you to maybe comment on that and how there already have been scoping meetings. So if you want to comment on that.
Well, it's true. There will be an environmental impact statement for this proposal. I think as individuals on the committee and as individual members of the community board, I think that we all have differing views as to the efficacy and fairness of most environmental impact statements. But it's not so much. Anyway, it's going to, yes, there is going to be an environmental impact statement. It will talk about the impacts in a kind of citywide way, which may or may not. It can't have the specificity of an individual project, even one like the Blood Center, because Manhattan is not Staten Island. But I think that there are not enough details of how this set of proposals will be rolled out for us to even begin to speak to their effects, on a kind of small level, neighborhood level way. We can all imagine good things happening as a consequence of them, and can all imagine bad things. But I think until we have more detail, we can't really say much more about it. Sharon.
Thank you, Anthony. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great.
Loud and clear.
Oh, okay, perfect. At the beginning of Anthony's presentation, he talked about the zoning resolution, and the first one was written in 1916. Almost 20 years before that, almost, but not quite, in 1901, New York City had its first tenement housing law, specifically providing for increased air and light. And the years since then, New York has consistently led the nation in looking at housing and creating housing, and in particular, affordable housing. Somewhere, perhaps, we have sort of jumped the tracks, if you will. In this conversation, during this conversation, and I just want to emphasize that we're having these conversations, and we'll be doing a deeper dive, as Anthony suggested. But the last 10 or 15 or so individuals who spoke generally felt that this particular package of housing suggestions and recommendations were not thought out at all. And I'm extremely sympathetic to that, but I am also wondering and thinking that there could be some kernels in this package that it is possible to support. And I'm also interested in hearing individuals who may have taken a deeper dive into the city of Yes, and in particular, the housing aspect of it. And if there's anyone who has found something that they could support in the package, I think it would be good to hear from them as well. I just want to make sure that we're being fair and hearing both sides of the issue. So if there's something that you support, or if you support the package overall, let us know. Please feel free and to voice your opinions as well.
Thank you, Sharon. Gail Barron.
Anthony, thank you so much for this presentation. I certainly found it enlightening. And Sharon, I think your point is well taken about kernels that we might be able to support. And I think that as you have further discussions and we get more edification as far as how these recommendations will specifically affect Community Board 8, as well as the city at large, that will probably be most helpful. But also going back to comments from Marco regarding the fact that we have a lot of new community board members now, some of whom may be well-versed in zoning, but many who probably are not, as well as Elaine's point that we really have a lot of people in the community who have no clue as to the city of Yes and what the ramifications might be. If I could just make a recommendation that we take Anthony's presentation and recommend to Valerie that that be placed on our website so that we can, as we keep sending out notifications about the city of Yes, I mean, this will be very helpful for anyone who has no real knowledge of what's going on. At least it starts the primer, and then just with a caveat that down the road, we'll be having more zoning and development committee meetings that'll do the deeper dive into the specifics of the proposal.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you, Gail. And we'll do that. All right, so we have Alita, Rita, Michelle, and Marco.
Thank you, Anthony, for allowing me to speak again. I just have one question, which is, again, the intersection of this with the mayor's proposal to eliminate environmental review for certain buildings, maybe under 20, I don't remember the details, maybe under 25 stories. I know that in some of the City of Yes business, there are limited or no future environmental reviews. And I think one of the things that we should look at is why that might make sense. I personally don't think it does, but why we should be asking for environmental reviews or environmental reviews in certain areas. 25-story buildings are not nothing, as someone once said. So I think that's it for now. I didn't realize that the city was doing something. I imagine that it will not be very detailed or very much recognizing that there might be significant environmental impacts. And I fully agree with Michelle that even though we're focused in the densest area in the city, obviously there are certain areas that cross the entire borough of Manhattan as well as the outer boroughs, and we should be alert to that because we're all citizens of this place. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. I think, and I actually sat in on part of an educational session on that environmental review thing yesterday. And yes, indeed, it is residential projects less than 250 feet tall. There used to be a much lower number, a much lower height. I couldn't quite figure out from, and I admit I was not there the whole time. I could not figure out actually what the benefit to the city was, the city in the sense of its citizens, to shortcut something that could be very revealing. But and it's unclear how far that's going to go. Rita.
I'm sorry I was feeling so negative, but
It's all right.
40 years of getting beat up, it sort of has an effect on you. There are 120,000 empty apartments in New York City right now. You all know of them, and then we keep building more and more. The other thing is that, and I've been to all 5 boroughs. No, all 4 boroughs. I didn't go to Staten Island because there's only one Mitchell-Lama on Staten Island. Is that in all of this, and we all say that Mitchell-Lama was so important and so successful that we had 100,000 affordable apartments. Some were for seniors, some took care of everything here. And that was the city and the federal government, not the city, that was the state and the federal government. Mm-hmm. Does anybody know why the state and the federal government aren't talking to each other about Mitchell-Lama 2? I happen to have known a young man who he worked at community service. He unfortunately passed away. He did his thesis on Mitchell-Lama 2. I just wonder why we are not pushing the state and the city and the federal government to help with this problem. We have a problem, and we are not coming up with any solutions that are viable. Developers became incredibly rich on the Mitchell-Lama program when they bought out. They had an interest-free rate loan for 25 years. Interest-free. So if it worked then, why can't it work now? We put a man on the moon. Oh, the first time he only circled the moon. Next time he landed on the moon. Just keep going. I don't understand why we're not. That's it. I'm putting away my soapbox.
Thank you, Rita. Don't you dare put away your soapbox. Michelle.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Mitchell Lama. I also thought that unions partnered with government for that. The successful Mitchell Lama that's down in the Coney Island area. Well, they're successful all over the place on 8th Avenue in the 20s. I'm familiar with them as a concept. I don't know where that land came from and what they had to do to get that land. But I also thought that unions or other entities were partners to that. And maybe that's something to look into. The other thing that I would like to look into, and I'd like this committee to look into, and maybe it can be part of our suggestions to the city of Yes, and that's R10A zoning. R10A zoning is a 225-foot height limit, but automatically built into that is a 20% bonus. They can build 20% higher for including affordable housing. The other thing about R10A, I was educated on this by my mentor, Marco, who knows all about zoning and everything else. But the other thing is that with R10A zoning, there's a mandatory 6 apartments per floor. So that's very helpful because when you're building the high, low density buildings and you're putting 1 or 2 apartments on a floor, as I say, we need them. I'm not willing to say we don't want them, but I am willing to say that we should have far more R10A buildings in the district that we currently have. And with the affordable housing bonus and with the mandatory 6 apartments on a floor, and I think it also allows commercial on the street level, on the ground floor, which is a good thing because that kind of commercial supports the residential that's above and in, not a big box store, but you're talking about supermarkets, cleaners, shoemakers, the thing that you need to sustain residency. So I would like to see if we are ever given the opportunity to make suggestions about the city of Yes, like, for example, on our York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenues, which we currently have no height limit, which city planning has basically said they don't care. They want no height limit. How that flies with their environmental concerns, where above 25 floors, the effects of the environment of a building are far more, which I guess is what prompted no need for review under 200. I guess that was their theory, but then they don't want height limit. The thing is all over the place. It's so inconsistent. But if we could get R10A on those avenues, if we could get R10A and on other blocks that we want to rezone residential, I think that goes a long way. And also developers can make money on it. You can't come up with something and then, well, nobody will build it. Nobody's going to build, no private developer is going to build a building with 50% affordable housing. They can't afford to do it with construction costs and land costs in this city. So, but they can make money with a 250-foot building, R10A, allowed 20% bonus for affordable housing, and also I think they can make money on the ground floor retail because they can hold those leases. They don't have to give those leases away. So there's a way to make money. So if we ever get the opportunity to make suggestions, which so far I only see us making suggestions in a way that modifies the already proposed entity that we really don't want, and we're trying to make an adjustment to it to make it more acceptable. So I hope we get the opportunity to do this. Anthony, let me ask you, what is the time frame for this? Because they're holding
We don't know.
hearings. I mean, I
No, they're holding
don't think this
information
is so far
sessions.
down the
Yeah,
road.
it's not hearings. It's not
They're
hearings.
not
Sorry?
hearings, they're information sessions.
No, I know, but do we have any time
No.
frame? Well, we are having resolutions in our various committees, but in our at land use, for example, and then the full board, our comments were only to modify their suggestions, which we didn't like, let's say. But I would like to have more aggressive suggestions about what we do want. How and when and if will we ever have that opportunity, and how much lead time do we need to do this research? I'd like some research on R10A. Anyway, and others, but I just wonder about process here, because I know, like always, you wake up one morning and then, oh, the hearing is next Tuesday, really? So, we need to get ahead of it and actually know what what's their time frame really. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle, for a good comment. Okay, Peggy.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you for your very informative report. I want to echo what Elaine said. There's 28 of us here now talking to each other, and how many thousands of rest of New York have no idea about what's going on. And I think that we need to bring much more of the public into the discussion. The city does not seem to be remotely interested in doing that. These information, quote unquote, sessions usually held at times when people have to work. They can't attend. No effort is ever made to reach out to them with links, NYC, postings, anything, even press reports to inform the public of this substantial change to the city of New York. Ask anyone on the street if they know what City of Yes is, and they will say no. So what I want to say is, Anthony, you had this wonderful report, which really informed us. But as I said, there are only 28 of us here. Why can't our committee do something to reach out to the public about this, and also reach out to the public about the special district that we're promoting? And I would be quite happy to be helpful, happy to help you, Anthony, Elizabeth, whatever, in trying to promote this. Gail and I promote our committee up to the wazoo. I'd love to help you do this too, because the tax-paying, voting citizens of New York have no idea about what the city is trying to impose on them. And so that is my pitch. And I hope you will take me up on this offer to help promote the information that you are so able to impart to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will try and take that up. Marco.
Thank you. I would like to address a couple of issues. The first one is the environmental impact. Greg, he's right. If you read carefully the whole document, at the end, that's where I found what they are planning to do in the Upper East Side. It's clearly they specify the community board 8, and they specify that the RAB they are planning to change. That's what they're saying over there. So Greg is correct. And I strongly recommend that everybody read that part because they recommend issues that has to be addressed and the environmental impact. So the second issue is I heard, several times that Rita, she just said there's 120,000 apartments available. Well, first of all, we have to understand how the real estate market works. Always we need to have a vacancy rate, always. In housing, it needs to have 5% of vacancy because that's allowed to mobility of the people or the workers to this place from one place to another one, to come in from another places to another one. So it is healthy to have. In reality, right now, the vacancy rate in New York City is 3.5, 3.6, and our community board have 2.7. So this is where you see that in our community, we have more demand of housing, more expensive is especially the housing market rate. So now let me address the issue that Sharon said. Sharon said it has to have some corners we can support. Absolutely, yes. I did a study. We can discuss and I can present that. It's approximately 22 minutes that I address what the developers are doing in our community. Not what I believe, not what somebody said, or one person that study and put in the paper. No, the developers are doing right now. So I found that there are two types of developers. One developer that demonstrate that we can follow him. We can follow in that direction and we can support him and we can support this kind of the developments in our community. We are not against affordable housing. We want to see that. The other part is, yes, I found also that most of the developers, what they do that is they build just only luxury housing. And that is the problem. They use luxury housing and they put the density very low. And that is the problem in our community. That's what we have to target. That is the negative part of the study. Finally, I think at this juncture, we had to start thinking and to put a resolution and to pass and to discuss in the community board. One of them it should be, for instance, is we had to stop the demolition of affordable housing. The affordable housing that is existing, we have to protect. If the developer wants to demolish, welcome. He can demolish, but he has to build like one of the developers did in our community. It can build within the development or within our community. Whatever he feels that is better for him is perfectly fine. So one of the major issues that I found is we need to protect the existing affordable housing. And we had to stop. And we can pass a resolution saying that the community board 8 is in support to stop the demolition of the affordable housing. And if the developer is willing to demolish and they need that, well, that is perfectly fine. They can build within the development or within our community. That will be a good idea to start thinking in the right positive way right now, because we need to have some points that we can increase our position, not only as a committee, but now as a position of the full board. The full board also has, right now, the position is 210. So we don't need to touch that part. We have to now to include to stop the demolition of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. And then I think Elaine, and then I think we should probably move the agenda. Go ahead, Elaine.
The one thing that came to mind as I'm listening and seeing what city planning is doing, it also has to go through the city council. And tonight I see only the representative for Assembly Member Rebecca Seawright listening. What is being done to engage Julie Menon and Keith Powers on protecting and supporting what we see as our needs in this community? I've not heard a peep. So I would suggest that you do outreach to the electeds to get them on board, as is done in every other community in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. All right, Michelle, one last thought.
The last thought is just to tell you that some of us have approached our council people. I cannot express to you their lack, I shouldn't say lack of interest, but I should say the lack of they don't want to get behind it. One said, well, you've got the 210 height limit resolution from the board. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's translated into action. And we would like our local elected officials to get behind that for us. And some of us have approached, and it was very clear to me that neither one of them are interested in doing that. And that's sad, but that's true.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think we will now move on.
Anthony, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Michelle a quick question. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. Given that experience, what are you thinking in terms of the impact on the 210 height limit and CB8's proposal?
Sorry, Sharon, you paid it. What do I think about their reaction to the 210? Is that what you're asking me?
I'm asking that, Michelle. I mean, you know, really within the context of your experience and interactions with our electeds regarding the 210 height proposal, and what kind of impact do you think that has had on it?
What I see, yeah, some, I can say that Rebecca Seawright has been supportive. I can say, now that's state, that's not city. I can say that Liz Kruger is very, very concerned about the low density high buildings, that you've got a 500-foot tower and you've got very, you know, limited occupancy. She's very concerned about that. So those are two state people. And I found that they were quite interested. In terms of our local people, I found that Julie Menon is very willing to hang her hat on the 210 height limit and says, well, if the community board supports it, then she would. But she hadn't offered any tangible effort that she would make. Well, if you want to support the 210 height limit by our community board, are you willing to go to city planning and advocate for it? Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to do that? I have not gotten any indication that either Julie Menon or Keith Power, while verbally they're supportive, but neither one of them has volunteered or even responded to my ask to go the extra mile. So that's what I found.
I know that was very difficult to do because you're very persuasive.
I tried. I tried. That was disappointing. And of course, in defense of, you know, Rebecca and Liz, they're state officials. So the fact that they're supportive of the effort is terrific. I can't fault them for not taking it to the nth degree, because the first question is, well, what did Julie Menon and Keith Power think about this? You know what I mean? Nobody's going to step on anybody's toes here. So I applaud them, but they're not the ones that need to take the lead.
Thank you, Michelle.
No, thank you.
That's a good
Okay.
segue.
Yes.
That's a good segue to Elizabeth.
I'll try to make it very quick because we've been here a few minutes. We have a proposal for the Yorkville, Lenox Hill special districts. We have filed the pre-application for this. For those of you who are not familiar with this proposal, the proposal it has three parts. It's for First, Second, Third, and York Avenues. They are the only unprotected, I think we would view it, streets or avenues on the Upper East Side. Every other street and avenue has a height limit. The north-south avenues and the wide crosstown streets all have a height limit of 210 feet, with the exception of Lexington Avenue, which is lower because it's narrower. So there is a huge context for our proposal, and this is just the small, 4 avenues that are a zoning disaster, where we lose affordable housing, where we get huge condo towers. And of course, we all are in favor of housing for billionaires, but I don't think that's one of the problems around here. The proposal will save the affordable housing, which is the tenements. So save it for the affordable housing and save the housing for the people who are already living in it. And as rather obviously a thing to point out is you don't have to replace what you don't tear down. So that saves that. We'll be working with the city planning, which has certain plans for supporting local retail and service stores, and proposing a height limit of 210, which is, if you were listening, that is the wide street height limit for the Upper East Side. Mm-hmm. The city Department of City Planning has said it doesn't support it. It doesn't see any reason for it. I think, well, I'll be polite, so I won't say what I think about the position they've taken. But this is something I think we have to pursue. And I think, people describing not getting much support from politicians, I honestly don't think it takes much of a spine to support affordable housing, community retail, and construction that preserves neighborhood character and the quality of life of residents. I think that they should speak up. We will pursue it, and I think that any suggestions people make, I don't want to hold this meeting up any longer. But as we go forward, we will welcome suggestions. We will discuss this. We will press our elected officials and remind them that every couple of years there's an interesting day when we get our own back. So thank you very much for listening to that, but it is a major program, and the community board itself is the applicant for it.
Elizabeth, because we do have some new people on the call as well as new community board members. Would you mind just discussing the history, just a tad bit? For instance, how long the community board has been working on this? If you remember the year in which we voted to support the 210 height limit, can you just take a moment to provide some background?
Well, I don't really remember, the year we supported first. We started a long time ago. It was driven by the loss of affordable housing, and the construction of these environmentally unfriendly glass huge towers kill birds, they destroy the environment, and they destroy community character, and people were complaining about it. And I think Elaine might remember, because she and I were co-chairs of this committee at the time. We started first looking for the 210 height limit, and then they applied to those two avenues which had the other problems. So it developed that way. We developed, instead of just asking for a 210 height limit, we felt that the special districts were a better idea. We engaged a planner. He developed the two special districts, and filed the pre-application, which is how you go through the process. It's the beginning of the process at city planning, and then they're supposed to work with you to get through, so it can be certified, get through the certification process. And that was where we got our toe in. And then the department of, because it hasn't got to the commission, the department
Yes,
decided that it wouldn't do anything about it. But
yes. If you don't mind, Kevin, can you unmute Elaine Walsh, as she was co-chair at the time? Just 1 second, Michelle. Is Elaine still on the call? I thought I saw her.
Yeah, she's there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, for giving me some time, and Elizabeth acknowledging when we were co-chairs. I think it was about 2017, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Jim Kleins was the chair at that point. And extensive work was done with the community. There were numerous committee meetings with the community, 400 or 500 people, all signed up to support the 210 height limit and special districts. As we moved forward, we did meet with city planning, the head of the Manhattan office, and some stuff. And at that meeting were every representative of our elected officials, which was impressive, as well as our community board chair. I think, Alita, you might have been the chair then. I can't really remember. And other important people from the board. And at that meeting, we had a full discussion. And one of the things that came up was, well, you shouldn't have any special, quote unquote, which I didn't think was special, accommodations, because you haven't done your fair share. And I said to them, explain fair share. And of course they couldn't. And all they said was the 2nd Avenue subway. And I said, excuse me, we lost a lot with the 2nd Avenue subway. Many of our residents were displaced. But if you want to talk to traditionally fair share, I'll tell you the number of social service, homeless services, aging services, I can go on. The city backed off and said, sorry, we did not mean to use the word fair share, but we would like to work with you. And so we were to proceed. And the Manhattan staff that were assigned were to work, and we were doing work. Whatever happened subsequently, I don't know. All I know now is there's been a resistance from city planning, and they are using false facts. One of the things that amazes me is that they say, well, you already have some tall buildings. Well, excuse me. Guess why we have them? There was the program POPs, privately owned public spaces. So a developer could say, I'll give you some space, and then you get to build higher. And that's what happened with a number of the buildings on the wide streets as well as the avenues. Terry Slater, who was a former chair who's now deceased, and I did a study on POPs. And we can tell you how many POPs there are. And I have now asked the committee to please put this on the agenda, because those buildings did not honor their commitment to open space. And many of them have doormen who tell you you can't go into the space. I'm not going to get into details, but we've been fighting this and presenting why we need this with all kinds of ludicrous resistance. We are a community that wants to see sunlight, wants to see the blue sky. We also don't want wind tunnels. We have wind tunnels now because of these buildings. We as a community have not benefited at all from any of the new development. And I'm concerned as I walk around the streets, what are we giving away and not getting back for our neighborhood? Every other community gets something. We get nothing. I looked at, I think, Alita, you mentioned the 83rd Street and 3rd Avenue building. I walked by it. It's a beautiful building, I have to tell you. And the gargoyles. Oh, it's gorgeous. However, it's a side street entrance. And they have a double wide curb cut into, I'm not if it's a portfolio or it's not a garage, but we don't permit curb cuts on a side street like that. How'd that happen? Who's in charge? DOB, city planning? I don't know. But your committee now, I'm sorry, I'm not
No, you
co-chairing.
can say our.
Okay, our committee, I still believe in it, needs to take a position and continue to present why our neighborhood that is the most dense, that has always wanted affordable housing, and no one would give it to us. I'll
Okay.
remember. Okay.
Just 1 second. I'm going to leave you unmuted, Elaine, but just in the interest of time, I
Sorry,
want to, yeah,
you get me going and I get going.
Okay. No, that's what's good about you. And so that's why I have to jump in just in the interest of time. I want to unmute Alita because she was chair of the board at the time. And also Michelle has been waiting very patiently. So I'd like to unmute both of them at the same time. Just be a little bit more patient, Marco. We'll definitely get to you. Okay.
Yeah, I was on the committee at the time because I've been on the board since 2006. So I remember this whole process, and I was on the committee when Elaine and Elizabeth were co-chairs. And so this is, and actually, I'll look for it. I didn't want to chance losing the call, but I have the resolution somewhere. So it's got a date on it. I'll look for it when I get off the call and I'll forward it to you. But what I wanted to say is this is an example of the false premise that the city of Yes is based on. This is exactly the thing. They think that that it's the height of buildings and small buildings that are the reason for the lack of affordable housing. It's a false premise. And that's one of the reasons that this proposal was sort of stymied at city planning, because the philosophy of the new commission is that no height limits, build the higher the better, because that's going to yield more affordable housing. It's a wrong premise. The premise of that is incorrect, and that's what they have built all of these changes. That's what the premise is. That's why I say to you, they don't think of consequences, nor do they really look to the history of all of this.
Alita,
Exactly as
was there,
Elizabeth and Elaine described.
Alita, was there anything you wanted to add? And Kevin, can you unmute Marco?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. I did want to add that when I was chair, I was down at that city planning meeting. And what they said to me, what one of the city planning reps said to me when we were leaving was, when I kept pushing her, she said, if we could show that there will not be a loss of affordable housing with a height limit, they would work with us. But yet they are blind to the concept that we have lost so much affordable housing precisely because of these towers. It's exactly the same thing that Elaine said, yet they acknowledge that if we could show them, and I think we have shown them over and over again, they would work with us. I also just want to add very briefly that when I was chair, I worked with other community boards on economic gentrification and the impact, because this really it's bringing in these towers, these buildings with fewer units, with double floors, triple floors, are bringing in a wealthy group of people into this area, whether they're investors or they live here. And that has impacts on the schools. It has impacts on healthcare. It has impacts on small businesses. And now those are unintended consequences that city planning seems to be oblivious to, is what happens when you just fill a neighborhood with market rate housing. What about the people who are not at that economic level? What about the people who have housing insecurity because now their buildings are being earmarked for sale to developers, and the landlord seeks to make an awful lot of money from the sale, and they'll be harassed, as I think Marco pointed out, with the changes in R8B that are proposed, and it will have a disastrous impact. But there just is such a failure to see what happens, or what may, or what is likely to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So essentially, just to summarize for people who are hearing this for the first time, the community board did submit an application to DCP. We have a copy of that application at the community board office. Feel free to contact Kevin or Will to receive a copy of the application. It's extremely informative, and you'll see the thought process that went into developing that application. And we're going to be looking at different ways in which we will be able to bolster and support the 210 height limit as we move forward. And that's a good segue, I think, to moving the agenda. And do we have anything under old business?
Yes.
We
No,
do,
no,
yes.
before
Yes,
I
Mark.
didn't
Oh,
I didn't
yes,
comment.
I'm sorry,
It's okay.
Marco.
Well,
Sorry,
okay.
yes, you're
Okay.
right.
I'm gonna be very brief. I'm gonna ask you if you allow me to share one slide, because I would like to read it to everybody else. It is extremely important. Can I share just only one script? It's and one sentence.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
please.
Marco, can you tell us
Thank
what
you.
that is in advance, please?
Oh, this is a statement made by city planning.
Okay.
Now I'm lost. Okay, I'm right here. Let me see where oh, That's the problem is, let me read it and that's it. So make it easier for everybody.
Okay, can you stop
Otherwise,
share
I'm gonna
screen?
take longer and I don't wanna do that. So let me read this statement. On the City of Yes Housing Plan, Mr. John Mangan from the Department of City Planning in the housing meeting said, please listen everybody what he said. Bad zoning forces people to build tall and skinny buildings that sometimes drives neighborhoods crazy. That is the statement from the Department of City Planning, one of the toppest executives at the city planning level. And that's, I think, is our argument in all of this. So city planning is preaching that, but in reality, what they are proposing is different. They try to create a less inclusive neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Marco. Any new business? Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. And I know it's precious. Your time is precious, and you hung in there with us.
Sharon, I think
thank you very
Alita has some old business or new business.
Or can I just make
we
one?
do. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Can I just make a
yes.
suggestion, Sharon? It's very quick, which is that for people who are displaced by construction, that the developer should find someplace in the neighborhood for those people to have housing, because we have no idea what happens to the people who lose their homes and their communities of perhaps decades. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, Alita. I'm sorry, Kevin, what did you say? Were you referring to Alita?
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So I really appreciate the time that you have taken to hang in there with us. Thank you so much, Anthony, for the presentation. We're going to have more of these, as a matter of fact. We're listening to you, by the way, and hearing that there are topics that you want to see the Zoning and Development Committee do a deeper dive in. And also, I want you to know that we do recognize our responsibility as we understand these things to reach out into the community so that they understand and are informed as well. Thank you, everybody.
Move
And
to adjourn. We need a move to adjourn.
Second.
thank you,
Thank you,
Michelle,
Michelle.
for having my back. All right. Thank you.
Good
Bye,
night.
Second from Rita, I
everybody.
saw.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night. Thank you, Kevin.